There are moments you never expect to experience, those that change everything permanently. My name is Elena. I'm 36 years old, and the memory of that day, of that unexpected moment, keeps coming back to my mind, like a vivid dream that can't fade away. I had always thought that married life would be a series of calm and ordinary days, without major surprises, a peaceful existence in which everything was already written and nothing could ever upset the serenity built with so much effort. Matteo and I had been married for 7 years. We had built a life together, made up of a house in the suburbs, weekends at the seaside, and dinners with friends. Everything seemed perfect, but in truth it was just a veneer of normality that hid a deep void that I didn't know how to fill. Don't miss the rest of my story. Subscribe to the channel and follow me to find out what happened. Matteo worked a lot, often traveled for work, and I found myself increasingly alone. His absences had become part of my routine, a phantom presence that now seemed normal. There were days when our once cozy home felt like just a collection of cold, empty rooms. I was trapped in that everyday life that seemed to want to suffocate me, yet I didn't have the strength to change it. On one of those days, I decided to take some time for myself. Matteo was out of town and the morning was silent. The air seemed suspended, and there was only the sound of water running in the shower to fill the house. The warm water enveloped me, slid along my skin as if it wanted to wash away all the weight of the last few weeks. I felt exhausted, empty, like I was living a life that wasn't my own, like everything I did was just an imitation of what a wife should be. I wondered if the problem was mine, if it was me who wasn't capable of being happy with that life that, on paper, had everything I could ever want. I closed my eyes, letting the water pamper me, when suddenly I heard a noise. The bathroom door opened slowly. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it was Matteo, that he had come back without telling me, but then I realized that it was impossible. "Sorry, I didn't know you were here." The voice of Giorgio, my father-in-law, took me by surprise. It was deep, quiet, but there was something about it that made me shiver. Giorgio had always been a constant presence in our lives after the death of his wife. From that moment, he began to spend more time with us, perhaps to try to fill the void that the loss had left in his life. He had always been loving, a father figure with whom I had a special relationship, but in that moment something was different. He stood there, standing in the bathroom doorway, and I couldn't look away. There was a palpable tension in the air, a silence filled with something I couldn't define. My heart was pounding. Every fiber in my body seemed tense, waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Giorgio took a step forward and I didn't retreat. Maybe it was the need to feel seen, to feel desired, something that Matteo hadn't made me feel for a long time. I felt invisible in my own life, and that feeling of being noticed, of being the center of attention, hit me with a force I didn't expect. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice a whisper. I don't know why, but I couldn't tell him to leave. I couldn't break that strange and forbidden magic that had been created between us. He came even closer, and when his gaze met mine, I realized that I was about to cross a line I never imagined I could cross. "You're beautiful," he murmured, almost voiceless. Those words hit me like a punch, and my heart started pounding so hard it made me dizzy. I hadn't expected it, yet part of me had wanted to hear him say it. Giorgio looked at me as if I were the only person in the world, as if in that moment nothing could exist except him and me. I felt a hand touch my face, delicate, almost hesitant. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to suppress everything I felt, but it was impossible. The emotions were too strong, too real to ignore. Have you ever been in a situation that pushed you beyond your limits? Share your experience in the comments. When I reopened my eyes, Giorgio was still there, so close that I could feel his breath mixing with the steam from the shower. I ran a hand through my wet hair, trying to cover myself, but his hand moved to my shoulder, stopping there, as if he was waiting for a signal from me. And in that moment, perhaps out of weakness, perhaps out of a desperate need to feel alive, I let it happen. He kissed me, and it was a sweet, slow kiss, but full of a passion that I didn't expect from a man of his age. Every cell in my body seemed to awaken, as if I was experiencing something authentic for the first time in years. There were no words. Everything happened quickly, but at the same time every gesture seemed to last an eternity. His hands touched me with a confidence I had never known. They made me feel alive, desired, like I hadn't felt for years. I let myself go into that contact without thinking about the consequences, without reflecting on what I was doing. Giorgio kissed me with an overwhelming passion, and I responded with all the desire I had inside. It was as if everything I had repressed for years was coming out in one moment. When we pulled away, we stood there in silence. The steam from the shower enveloped us, and I felt vulnerable, naked not only in my body but also in my soul. Giorgio looked at me for a long time, and I saw a mixture of remorse and desire in his eyes, as if he too was aware of having crossed a line that he should never have crossed. "I won't say anything," he whispered finally, breaking the oppressive silence. "This stays between us." I nodded wordlessly, unable to find the right words. When Giorgio came out of the bathroom, he left me alone with my thoughts, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. I felt like a little girl who had just broken a sacred rule, and yet there was nothing I could do to fix it. I sat on the edge of the tub. The water continued to flow uselessly, while a feeling of emptiness devoured me from the inside. From that day on, every time I met Giorgio, that moment came back to the surface, a silent ghost that crept between us. We never spoke about what happened again, but I knew we both carried it inside us like an invisible scar, a wound that would never heal. I continued to live my life, my role as a wife, but nothing was the same as before. Every time Matteo looked at me, I wondered if he could perceive what I had done, if he could sense the betrayal I had committed in the silence of an ordinary morning. But he never said anything. Maybe he never knew, or maybe he chose to ignore the signs, too busy with work and his pursuits to notice the change in me. The weight of the betrayal remained there, a constant and silent presence that accompanied me wherever I went, like a secret that was slowly consuming me. Giorgio returned to his usual routine, always present, always attentive, but with a different look every time we met. There was a silent tension between us, an awareness that made every meeting full of meaning, even when we only talked about banal things. Every time our hands accidentally touched, I felt a shock go through me, a silent reminder of what had happened. I was trapped in a cage of conflicting emotions, between the desire to return to that moment and disgust with myself. Months passed, and I tried to focus on something else: work, home, friends. I tried to save my marriage. I organized romantic dinners. I tried to rekindle the flame between me and Matteo, but nothing really seemed to work. Every time I looked at Giorgio, I felt my heart tighten, and I couldn't avoid that pang of pain and desire. I realized that I could no longer continue like this, that the guilt was eating away at me. I had to make a choice, and any decision I made would have a price. Finally, I decided to talk to Matteo. I didn't tell him everything. I couldn't confess what I had done with his father, but I told him that I felt lost, that I needed to find myself away from everything. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pain, but eventually agreed. He took my hand, and for the first time in a long time I felt the warmth of that love we had shared in the beginning. I left home for a while, trying to figure out who I was and what I really wanted. It was a difficult period, full of doubts and loneliness, but in the end, I understood that I could not continue to live in regret. When I returned, Matteo was there waiting for me. We decided to start over one step at a time without trying to forget the past, but trying to build a better future. We both had scars, but those scars made us stronger, more aware of what we had and what we might lose. With Giorgio, there was never a real confrontation, only a gradual, almost imperceptible distancing, as if we had both understood that the best path was to let ourselves go. Every now and then, when we met at family dinners or during parties, there was a look that was enough to remember everything, but none of us needed words. Matteo and I started building our relationship again. It was slow and tiring work, made up of small daily gestures, silences to fill, and trust to rebuild. There were good days, when I felt like everything was going well, and days when I felt like I was back to square one. But I didn't give up, and neither did Matteo. There was still love between us, and that was enough to keep trying. It took months, maybe years, but I finally felt at peace again. It was not the same peace as before, that of a perfect and flawless life, but a more authentic peace, made of accepted imperfections and sincere compromises. Over time, I learned to forgive myself for what I had done. I learned that mistakes don't define an entire life, that what matters is how you choose to deal with them and move forward. One evening, while Matteo and I were sitting on the sofa, watching an old black and white film, I turned to him and looked at him. I saw his serene expression, his light smile as he followed the plot of the film, and I felt my heart melt. I took his hand, and he looked at me, surprised, then smiled and intertwined his fingers with mine. There were no words to say, just the awareness that, despite everything, we were still there, together, ready to start over every day, to choose to love each other despite the difficulties. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write, "I want the sequel" in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of the next publications. Thanks.